Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to episode number 68 of the Primetime Rundown right here on the Eastern Observer. I'm Joey Jarzynka alongside my man Rob DeLuca. A little bit of a different look here since it is the two of us. But Rob, good to see you, sir. And Ian Schraier is on assignment tonight. He's doing other things. Mike Szabo is over at in Queens doing some Belson Stadium stuff for men's soccer at St. John's. And it's just you two. It's just us two, rather. And Jesse Granger, of course, he'll be joining us in a few moments. DeLuca, how are things with you?
Oh, things are great. You know, it's another Friday evening. You can't have it any other way. It's a phenomenal show for us tonight. And honestly, I kind of dig the way our nameplates are like this with just the two of us. And honestly, did the show get more handsome?
I think they did. I really do believe that they did. And
I really think that's the truth here. But yeah, we've got Jesse Granger coming momentarily. After that, we've got Scott Burnside, the legend from ESPN. And then we're going to have the Essential Wrestling Podcast's own Al Carl on tonight to discuss some NFL with us. It's a packed show, and it's going to be beautiful.
Not only is it a packed show, so as you brought up earlier with Jesse Granger, he's going to come on in a few moments, but Jesse Granger covering the Vegas Golden Knights for The Athletic and a correspondent for the National Hockey League for the NHL Network. He'll be on shortly, followed by Scott Burnside. He's now a freelance podcaster, as DeLuca brought up earlier, formerly at ESPN, the Dallas Stars, as well as The Athletic. And then, of course, we are going to be starting our crossover schedule with Al Carl and the Essential Wrestling Podcast, where obviously we start off a little survivor pool where we kind of, come up with some pick'ems and try and figure out who's going to get some wins and victories and whatnot. And he should be on around like 8:15-ish. But it's going to be a really good show tonight, DeLuca. And
Joey, if I may, is it bad that we continuously keep everybody except for you seem to do well last week, but overall we're all losing to a bunch of people that talk about wrestling for the most part in their lives? So
it's really crazy to see how bad some of my picks were, how bad some of the few other picks were. It's just been an absolute disaster.
I mean, hey, you had the faith in Joe Burrow, and he let you down. It's as simple as that.
I mean, it's really unbelievable to see what's been going on over there. But, ladies and gentlemen, let's get things started with our show being presented to you by Black Cats NYC. Make sure you download their newest album, Black Cats NYC. Their newest album, Free Cake, is out now. Play loud. Listen on Apple Music, Deezer, YouTube, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, and Spotify. And also, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot thank you all enough for joining us here on YouTube. But if you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, we cannot thank you all enough for doing that as well. It's really, like I said, it's really a jam-packed show tonight. We've got Scott Burnside coming on. We're just trying to get in touch with Jesse Granger here now, make sure that he's coming on. But let's get things started here, with the National Hockey League, because this, DeLuca, is just, we're 3 days into training camp. Really amazing stuff here. And
just got started. A lot of teams had their first days of on ice training today, so it really is a great thing. And a lot of the teams out west in the Pacific Division really got themselves going. And you know what? Speaking of the Pacific Division, we have, I think, maybe the perfect guest to help us out here. And
I would say so. I really do believe that would be the case as we welcome in Jesse Granger. He covers the Vegas Golden Knights for The Athletic and also a correspondent on the NHL Network. Ladies and gentlemen, Jesse Granger. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us here tonight on the Primetime Rundown. And how are things with you out west?
Great. Yeah, it's fun. The guys are back on the ice. Just got done with the second day of training camp today. They're scrimmaging each other, obviously not as close to real games, but it's good to have actual hockey being played in front of us. Also, getting to do in-person interviews. We're getting to talk to Pete DeBoer and Robin Leonard and all these guys for the first time in about a year and a half in person. So a lot of fun.
It's really, really unbelievable stuff to see what COVID does. Just in a couple of years, we've had to resort to going to doing these Zoom interviews and really everything else that completely takes the personal aspect out of things with a lot of these players, and the face to face and really getting to see who these guys are on and off the ice. Really, really amazing stuff. But that's great to hear, Jesse, and hopefully that you've been safe and healthy all throughout the last. I would say I think it's 16 months. I've lost count however long we've been under this isolation here. But Jesse, let's get things started here. The Pacific Division. We are starting our preview special. Obviously, we've got Scott Burnside on right after you to talk about the Central Division. But first, the Pacific with you. You covered the Golden Knights. There has been continuous talk about certain people, and one of which being Evgeny Dodonov, and getting to see also about from last year when Alex Pietrangelo came through. Nate Schmidt was sent up north to Vancouver. We got to hear a little bit about I would say these players having faith in Kelly McCrimmon and also George McPhee too, of the sense of security. Are they going to be able to play out their whole contract that they signed there? Because we're starting to send these players away, and obviously it's not a fantasy hockey team. This is a legitimate hockey team. And now that we're starting to see, a brand new pair, Nolan Patrick and Dodonov coming in, what are your thoughts early on in the first couple of days of training camp in Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Golden Knights have kind of gone for the big swing every offseason, right? They went to the Cup final in year one, and what did they do? They got rid of James Neal and David Perron, two of their biggest scorers, and they go out and get Paul Stastny, who was a big free agent signing. They trade for Max Pacioretty. They make the huge move to trade and get Mark Stone. Last offseason, they make the biggest move of the offseason to sign Alex Pietrangelo. That's kind of been their MO. This year, I think they took a step back and they said, I think we have enough stars on this team. The top of this lineup is good enough to win a Stanley Cup. What hasn't been good enough is the depth. So I think that they decided, instead of going out and trying to get a Jack Eichel or any of those big names that were kind of out there, Seth Jones, they're like, let's get some guys to fill out the bottom of this roster and give better support to our top six. So Evgeny Dadonov is a proven scorer in this league. He had a down year in Ottawa, but you saw him in Florida when he was playing with talented players. He puts the puck in the net, and I think he's going to be one of the best players to ever play on. He's right now he's skating on the third line for the Golden Knights, so that's a major mismatch, and that's without Alex Tuch. Alex Tuch is going to miss the first few months of this season with a shoulder surgery that he underwent in the offseason. When they get him back, they have 9 legitimate top 6 centers. So they're basically going to have 3 lines of scoring options. And then their fourth line, Nolan Patrick, Brett Howden, 2 guys who haven't produced at the NHL level but have offensive potential. Both were first-round picks. The Golden Knights believe they're going to get more out of those guys. You saw Ryan Reeves, who's been a staple of the fourth line here in Vegas for 4 years. He gets traded to New York. I think that kind of signals a change in the overall philosophy of the bottom 6 of this team. They used to be kind of the physical grinders. They're not going to score, but they're going to keep the puck in the offensive zone. They're going to bang the other team up. And then when Stone and Pacioretty and Carlson and Smith and those guys get out there, they can score. I think this year, Pete DeBoer, he mentioned attacking in waves. And I think this year, the Golden Knights are really going to try to play their bottom 6 a little more than they have. They're going to try to spread the minutes a little more evenly distributed so that Mark Stone and them aren't getting taxed so much. He mentioned he's going to take penalty kill minutes away from some of the top guys like Stone and Carlson, who have been kind of playing all 3. They're the number 1 even strength guys, they're the number 1 power play guys, and they're the number 1 PK guys. He wants to take some of those new guys like Howden and Patrick and have them play penalty kill minutes to help those forwards, because the Golden Knights have gotten so deep in the playoffs 2 years in a row, and then the scoring dries up. Yeah. And you look at it and you say, well, this team was the number 3 scoring team in the league last year behind Colorado and Pittsburgh. Scoring isn't an issue. Why does it keep happening in the playoffs? And I think what it is teams go through scoring droughts. Players go through scoring droughts, no matter how good they are. Look at Nathan McKinnon and that line. It's the best line in hockey, and they went through a scoring drought against Vegas. And McDavid and Draisaitl, they get to the playoffs, and suddenly they have a couple bad games. No one else on that team scores, and they're out. I think the Golden Knights are thinking with Dadonov and Patrick and Tuck when he comes back, and that group, they're hoping just supplement what the top six is doing, give them some support, and then the nights where Stone and Pacioretty get shut down, because it's going to happen, you get scoring in other places.
Now, something that we've gotten to hear a lot of the offseason all the way up till now, and I'm sure you're still hearing it out in Vegas as well, is that the Golden Knights are really missing that 1C, that number one center. And William Karlsson, I don't want to call him a flash in the pan because he hasn't been obviously the superstar that they thought that he was going to be after year one, but he's been relatively consistent since then. What are your thoughts on that 1C question mark for this Golden Knights team? What happens there?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the hardest position to fill for an expansion team because centers are the most valuable position. Teams didn't expose them in the expansion draft.
Right.
The only way to get an elite 1C is to draft them high. And the Golden Knights haven't picked high. I mean, they've had one pick in the top 10 in franchise history, and that was Cody Glass, and he didn't work out. They ended up shipping him to Nashville this offseason. They're hoping Nolan Patrick can become what people thought he was. I think right now they're sticking with Chandler Stevenson at 1C. And when I say that, he's not the best center on the team. William Karlsson is far and away, obviously, the best center on this team. But he won't play on the top line with Stone and Pacioretty because Smith, and Marchessault, they're three players that are greater than the sum of their parts, right? When you break those three up and you play them with other players, they aren't the same guys. But when they play together as a unit, they're one of the better second lines in hockey. I think they were top 20 in the league last year, overall lines. So they are a very good second line, but you can't split Karlsson up from those guys. So you end up not playing your top center, your best center on your top line. And for them, it's Chandler Stevenson. I think that they like the fit between Pacioretty and Stone. Pacioretty and Stone are two big, heavy players who don't necessarily skate that well, but they're really skilled with the puck. Yeah. The biggest issue they have is creating space because guys can fly around them. You put a player as fast as Stevenson, he's probably the fastest skater on the team, him or Tuck. And he kind of creates space for those guys. He tries to get those outlet passes. He tries to sneak behind the defense. And when he does that, it spreads the defense out. It gives Pacioretty and Stone a little more space to work and do what they do so well with the puck. So Stevenson's a good fit there. I think, obviously, ideally, you'd like to have a better center than Stevenson, and you'd like to push him down the lineup. If suddenly Chandler Stevenson's on the third line down there with Tuck and Dadonov, that is an unbelievably good third line. But you have to have someone to force Stevenson out of that lineup. Last year, Cody Glass got a couple chances, very short chances, and he didn't work out, and they moved on. I wouldn't be surprised if Nolan Patrick gets a look. I don't expect him to start between Stone and Pacioretty on the top line, but right now he's skating on the third line between Dadonov and Matthias Janmark. Yeah. But whether it's an injury to Stevenson or a really good stretch by Nolan Patrick, if he's on fire, I expect at some point this season he may get a chance to play between Stone and Pacioretty. And if he does, and he suddenly becomes that guy who Philadelphia thought he could be when they drafted him second overall, it makes the Golden Knights center depth all of a sudden look a lot different.
Well, and you know what? It's almost low risk, high reward on a nice signing there from Nolan Patrick. DeLuca, let's go to Seattle quickly because why not? Let's go from all the way to the top of the division all the way down to the bottom. DeLuca, take it away.
Yeah, sure. Jesse, again, thank you for coming on here. Let's talk a little bit about the brand new team coming into the National Hockey League for the first time in the Seattle Kraken. And everyone kind of seemed to have the same reaction to that expansion draft. And it was more or less, what is the angle that the Kraken are trying to pursue? Because it seems like they left a lot of key players on the board there that they really could have taken to cement themselves like the Vegas Golden Knights did in their expansion draft to make themselves a contender right away. And it seems like Seattle went a completely different route. You leave guys like Carey Price on the board. You're leaving guys like a depth guy like Josh Bailey on the board. It's just a lot of interesting decisions that the Kraken went with. And right now you're looking at a top line of Jaden Schwartz, Jordan Eberle, and essentially, I would think someone like I would guess Jared McCann to center them, but it's really hard to say. What do you see in this Kraken team in year one?
Yeah, so covering the first expansion team, and remembering what the months after the initial expansion draft were like, I am not going to say that team is going to be bad, because I have learned my lesson. we all have. But what I will say, and I've said, I don't think Seattle did as well in the expansion draft as Vegas did. And I think it's partially because GMs learned from their experience with Vegas, and Seattle, it was harder for them. But to me, the Vegas roster right out of the gate and the Seattle roster are not very different. I don't think Vegas's was that much better. When you look back on it, Marc-Andre Fleury, now we see him as this Vezina goalie, but when Pittsburgh was getting rid of him, and they gave a second-round pick to Vegas to intentionally take him, people didn't think he was going to carry this team to the playoffs. James Neal is a guy who has scored goals, but nobody thought he was leading a team to the playoffs. David Perron, same thing. So the rosters to me are similar. To me, the difference is Vegas got a similar roster to what Seattle had, but they had 3 extra first-round picks, a couple second-round picks. They had Shea Theodore and Alex Tuck, who were prospects at the time. They punted on a lot of guys in order to stock up for the future. And then they got lucky and hit on some guys like William Karlsson and Eric Holla and McNabb, and guys that people didn't expect to be as good as they were, but they weren't trying to build the best team possible. They were trying to gain future assets. Seattle also wasn't trying to build the best team possible. Otherwise, they would have taken all those guys, like you said, Tarasenko and all these guys that were available. But they didn't get the future capital. They didn't build the best team possible, and they still got nothing for the future. They didn't get a single draft pick. So in that aspect, I don't think they did anywhere near as well as Vegas. But I think, one, it was harder. I think they called GMs and tried to get deals, and they were like, absolutely not. That's not happening again. And I also think another thing to consider in this is that things have changed a lot in 4 years. I know it's only been 4 years since Vegas, but COVID and the financial impacts that has had on the NHL have changed the way salary cap space is viewed. And teams around the league are hurting for cap space more than they ever have. And I think salary cap space is more valuable now than it was 4 years ago. So Vegas was taking on terrible contracts, right? Clayton Stoner, David Clarkson's contract, which was
Kyle Grabowski as well from out here on Long Island too.
Right. So they took a bunch of terrible contracts, eating that cap space just for draft picks. Whereas now Seattle didn't want to do that. They did not want bad contracts. They have no bad contracts on that team, other than you could argue the ones that they signed, like the Dreger contract. You could argue is a little big, but they signed that deal. They didn't take it on. So I think cap space is more valuable than it was back then. Draft picks are less valuable than they were back then. So Seattle decided we're choosing we're choosing cap space over assets. So Seattle has a ton of cap space, and that's a valuable thing nowadays. So I think there are layers to it.
Yeah. Now, in terms of Seattle, we continue to hear, many critics say, well, the Pacific Division is really the weakest division in the National Hockey League now. The Golden Knights, it's a complete runaway. But then you also have the LA Kings. You've got you got the Sharks on the bottom. You've got an up-and-coming Ducks team in the next few years. Now you add Seattle to the mix. You've got Edmonton there. You've got Calgary there. Do you agree with all of that, Jesse, when you hear that the Pacific Division is really the weakest one in the league?
Yeah. I think the Pacific's the weakest division in the league by a pretty wide margin.
Okay. We just needed your confirmation on that one.
Well, I mean, this is hockey, right? And things don't always happen. I mean, this sport, more than any other sport, bounces happen here or there. Teams get hot early in the season. Suddenly they feel differently about themselves. A team like Vancouver, I look at Vancouver, and 2 years ago when they played the Golden Knights in the playoffs up in the bubble, and they brought Vegas to 7 games, and they've got all these young players, Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson, and the future was bright for that team, and it looked like, man, they're on their way up. Like, this is going to be a problem for the Golden Knights in the Pacific Division for years to come. Then last year they were terrible, and it was just an awful season. They were bad in a North Division that wasn't all that competitive. I think they were hit hardest by COVID. Obviously, we know that. I think things are like, that's a team that I could see if they start well, suddenly that young group of players, they start playing well, and suddenly they don't look like the team they did last year. So I do think, and like the Ducks and Kings, I don't know if they're ready yet. I think that in 2 or 3 years, those two are going to be a handful because they've got so many prospects and they've really built up their pipeline really well. But I don't think they're going to compete this year. Calgary, I'm not sure what they're doing. I think they're going to get good goaltending from Markstrom. I don't know if Calgary is ready, but I do think that this division is Vegas's to lose. I mean, last year they were competing with Colorado and Minnesota and St. Louis. And all 3 of them are gone now, and they're replaced by 3 Canadian teams that weren't very good last year. So I think this division, the Golden Knights should cruise through this division, but things don't always go the way you expect in hockey. And like I said, I think there are some teams. Edmonton's another one. You can never sleep on a team with the 2 best players in the world, arguably. So and I think those teams, if they can start well early in the season, things can go right for them. If Edmonton starts off poorly, it's probably going to end really, really ugly. Like hockey's funny that way.
Now, I want to circle back to Vegas before we get to your picks, before we close out our time here on the show. Jesse, we got to see Alec Martinez. He re-signed in Vegas. Talk about the depth that Vegas has on that blue line. Do you feel that it's a lot? Do you feel that they really are secure there? If one man goes down, who can take over?
I think they're really solid if one guy goes down. They've got 7 NHL defensemen on this team, and they got rid of Nick Holden. They traded Nick Holden in the offseason. Yep. He was their 7th guy last year. But I think part of the reason they did that was salary cap, but the other part was a really strong confidence in Dylan Coghlan, who he was an undrafted player out of – he came to camp here, got signed. He wasn't drafted, but he's really developed quickly. People in the organization tell me he's got the hardest shot of any player in the organization, even on the NHL club. He's played mostly in the AHL. Last year, they got stuck in a crazy salary cap situation where they couldn't call guys up and they didn't have enough forwards. So Dylan Coghlan had to play forward. And he actually played forward more than he played defenseman last year. And that was a tough situation. He didn't look great as a forward because he hadn't played that position since he was like 8 years old. But the team has a lot of confidence in him. He's looked really good in these first 2 days of camp. He moves well. He's a guy who can fill in on the power play if you have to. They don't want him there. Trey Theodore and Pietrangelo and Martinez are the power play guys, but he can fill in if one of those guys were to go out. So I think they are very confident with 7 defensemen. Now, this is hockey. These guys are blocking shots. Martinez blocks more than anyone. If if 2 defensemen go down, that's when they're going to have to start using some of that youth. They've got some rookies who haven't played in the NHL. Caden Korzak was a 2nd-round pick. He's looked good. They have some guys who are really young who could step in, but that's an unknown. You don't know what you have in those guys. But yeah, I think they love Zach Whitecloud's development. He's a bottom pair guy, but I think he's ready for minutes. They're trying to find ways to get him on the ice more. Obviously, Pietrangelo, Theodore, Martinez, and McNabb are super solid. So I think their defense depth is good. It's not great, but it's good.
DeLuca, let's close this one out.
All right. Well, Jesse, we were so happy that you could come on, and I started this little, rapid, pick 'em how things are going to go during our NFL preview segment. So I'm bringing it over to the NHL, and I'm going to ask Scott Burnside about the Central Division when he comes on a little later. So 1 to 8, how do you see this division stacking out? And then of the 3 to 5 potential teams, 3 minimum, potential of 5 playoff teams that could come out of the Pacific Division, do you see any of them really doing any damage?
All right, let me 1 through 8. I've got to pull it up to where I've got them all there. I think the Golden Knights are the only team in this division that I would pick to threaten a deep run in the playoffs. Like I said, I'm high on Vancouver. I think Vancouver with the right start and if the things go right for that team, I think they can be really good. I'm going to pick Vancouver to finish 2nd in this division. So I'll go Vegas first, Vancouver 2nd, and that's probably not what most people have. I'll go Edmonton 3rd.
Okay.
And then, oh man, let's go Seattle 4. I think Seattle's going to be they're not going to be the Golden Knights. That's a once in a million thing. Like, we're never going to see that again, an expansion to do what they did. But I think Seattle's going to be better than people think. I think let's go Calgary after that. And then the Kings will be better than a year ago. Ducks and then Sharks in last place. The Sharks, I just don't trust that team. I think they've got a lot of talent. They just have not been the same since Couture left since Pavelski left. And I just don't trust them. So I'll put them in last.
Yeah. And Jesse, number 4, Seattle 4, you said. Wild card or no?
No. To be honest, this division's barely. They probably don't even deserve to get 3 teams. I think the Central, and then like Scotty can tell you, I think the Central should get all the playoffs. I think it should be Vegas and then the Central.
Well, Jesse, just before you go, Matt Steffiero has a question for you. Who is your favorite to win the Cup?
It's a good question. I picked Tampa last year, and because they're so good, and I want to pick them again this year, but they lost a lot. Tyler Johnson suddenly gone. That team is not the same. So I think Colorado's trending in the right direction, and they remind me of Tampa Bay before Tampa Bay won the Cup because they're so talented. They're the team everyone picks, right? Like Tampa Bay for the last 5 years, they've been the team everyone picks, and then they couldn't get it done in the playoffs, and they would lose to teams that are clearly worse than them. Colorado has had some of that in the last couple of years. I think Vegas was an equal opponent to them. But if I had to pick a favorite to win the Cup, I think Colorado.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, Jesse Granger, correspondent for the NHL Network and also covers the Vegas Golden Knights for The Athletic. Jesse, thank you so much for taking time out of your Friday afternoon where you are on the West Coast. We really appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. We look forward to having you back on in the future for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, Jesse Granger, we really appreciate him coming on here. But now, ladies and gentlemen, because of the error last week, there was some power issues where I was. We had to move episode 68 to tonight. Now we're going to double up on our NHL preview.
They think I'm the one with the power issues.
That is fair. Well, especially
this darkness behind
that is definitely true. But Jesse was supposed to come on last week, so we had to rain check that one. No pun intended.
Could not be more thankful that he came back on again.
And we'll definitely when I let him know later, I will definitely let him know about that again. But ladies and gentlemen, let us get you Scott Burnside right here on the show. Let's take it away.
Previewing the NHL Central Division, we are alongside with Scott Burnside. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Burnside, former ESPN writer for about 17 years, and then eventually moved to The Athletic and with the Dallas Stars further after. And now, a freelance podcaster as well as a contributor. Scott Burnside. Scott, how are you? And thank you so much for joining us here today.
Doing very well. Thanks for having me aboard. I assume my time in Dallas qualifies me as a Central Division expert, even though that was a few years ago. But the Central has always been one of my favorite divisions. Always lots of news, always lots of intrigue in the Central. And I don't think it's any different this year, but looking forward to it. Thanks for having me aboard.
Scott, it's really wild because just early on before our show tonight, we were discussing, Rob and myself, we were talking about how every NHL offseason, there's always so much to talk about, whether it be the Central, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Metro, whatever it may be. But this year, the Central, there's so much to talk about. And I want to start with St. Louis first because you've got Vladimir Tarasenko, who's got 2 years left, $7.5 million AAV. There were some trade talks with him out here on Long Island. Lou Lamoriello, there was some chatter, some rumor, obviously. Nothing was confirmed because if there was, Lou would have, put the kibosh on it. To see if there might have been some availability in terms of Tarasenko and his offseason shoulder surgery a couple of years ago has not been the same. Then you've got Pavel Buchnevich, and then you also have Brandon Saad, who they brought in as well to kind of quote unquote replace him, or that's what the rumor was. What do you see with St. Louis this year? Because there's so many different storylines around there.
Yeah, no, I think this is a critical year for the St. Louis Blues. And the other recent addition, of course, Ken Hitchcock coming back as a consultant. He and GM Doug Armstrong, longtime friends and colleagues going back literally decades. The two are very tight. And I'm really pleased for Ken Hitchcock because I think this will be a better fit for him in terms of his comfort zone than what he was doing with Edmonton. My sense is that he'll be a much more hands-on. He's known head coach Craig Berube for a long time. I don't think there's any kind of, potential for friction or anything like that. But this is a really, I think there's a lot of pressure on Craig Berube this year. The Blues, of course, when Craig Berube came in, replacing Mike Yeo, and the Blues win their first ever Stanley Cup in 2019, the results haven't been very good, especially playoff time the last 2 years. A lot of issues, of course, the COVID impacting everything. But that does not look like the team from 2019, the last 2 playoff years. And I think there's a lot of pressure on the Blues to get back to that championship form. The Central, my sense of it will be they're very tightly packed. Once you get beyond Colorado, the clear front runner in my mind, there's a lot of question marks. I think there'll likely be 5 teams from the Central that will likely go to the playoffs. But this is a really important year for the Blues, and I thought Doug Armstrong did an interesting job. Pavel Buchnevich didn't, his contract. This is not an issue where the Rangers didn't want Buchnevich back. Very important part of that Ranger team, very popular in that room. I think he's going to be a great add to the depth of a Blues team that really is an offense by committee. That's how they got it done in 2019. I think Torrey Krug is going to be a much, much better fit in his second year in his second year with the Blues. And for me, the key is, as you mentioned, Vladimir Tarasenko. 3 shoulder surgeries, hasn't been quite the same. Some obvious friction within the organization about his role. I know he felt maybe he should have been in line for the captaincy. I don't think that that's necessarily a legitimate thing, but I think it's going to be fascinating how you reintegrate Tarasenko into that room, right? Because it's clear the Blues did entertain moving him. There were teams that were interested. I think the shoulder surgery and the cap hit probably put the kibosh on that. But I really think that the Blues and their experience and the fact that this core has won together, I think it makes Tarasenko coming back into the fold and fitting much easier than it might be a player on a different team in a different circumstance. The real question is, though, can he unleash that shot like he has historically after 3 shoulder surgeries? And I think the jury's still very much out on that.
Yeah, that's a very good point you make, because Scott, we remember early on where, we just like what I said in the open about Brandon Saad coming aboard, and once they signed that big contract for Saad, when he came over from Colorado, we heard a lot of rumors saying, well, okay, this now might be the end officially of Tarasenko, because who's going to replace Tarasenko? Well, that's going to be Brandon Saad. Where does Brandon Saad fit in all of this now, if the rumor is correct, where Tarasenko has looked really good so far through the first couple of days of training camp?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And listen, I don't think you can have you can't have too much experience. That Brandon Saad's a 2-time Stanley Cup winner, won them early in his career in Chicago. I thought he was a really nice fit in Colorado. I thought, with a team that had lots of ups and downs in the playoffs, I thought he was very consistent. And he's a guy that can play up and down the lineup. And I think if you go back to 2019, yes, Ryan O'Reilly was a force. Yes, Tarasenko, always a danger to score. Last year, of course, David Perron had an outstanding year, often on and off and on, and now on again, St. Louis Blue. But I think the strength of that team is in their depth. It's how they got it done in 2019. And I think Brandon Saad, listen, my sense of Craig Berube is you don't have a lot of time to be, if the team starts to go sideways, my sense is that there will be a lot of movement within that lineup. If guys are producing, they're going to play in the top 6. They're going to get power play time. And if they aren't, then there are lots of players in that lineup, whether it's a Robbie Thomas or, any of those players who have at times shown real sparks of offensive ability. If you aren't getting it done, there are players in that lineup who will get a chance. And I think Brandon Saad figures prominently into that kind of mix.
Yeah. It's really crazy also to see with Nashville too, and that's the next team we're going to move to here. And the reason why I want to move there right away is because Rob DeLuca is a diehard Devils fan, and he knows all about John Hines. He knows all about the troubles that John Hines had here in a couple of miles west of me in New Jersey. But now we're getting to see, quote unquote, a rebuild. I don't know if we want to say maybe it's too soon to call Nashville a rebuild, but we're beginning to see Philip Forsberg, he's in a final year of his contract, and there's some talk that he might be shipped away before the trade deadline, where David Poile might have to retool a few things. And I remember saying this to Rob, saying that once John Hines got there and then things began to go a little further south, I mean, this really had disaster written all over it. And just keep in mind too, and Scott, you can attest to this too, Nashville was just a few years out of a Stanley Cup final run. How do they just go from, doing so well under Peter Laviolette for so many years, and then they bring in Hines, they bring in a few other pieces, and can't get it done whatsoever?
Yeah, that the decline in Nashville is curious, to say the least. And certainly, maybe it's because I live in Atlanta and I can get to Nashville in 4.5 hours, and it's almost like a home team to me. Yeah. In fact, I was there for the first two games of the first two games in Nashville, so games 3 and 4 against Carolina in the first round. And it's such a terrific marketplace. And we all know what it was like in 2017 when they went to the final. But you're right. There's been a significant decline there. The team has, I think, lost its identity. I think David Poile has alluded to that. I think John Hines, I really like John Hines as a coach, and I know he's a little bit understated. And I think what you saw from John Hines and the Predators in the latter parts of last season, as they surged to the playoffs in that sort of revamped Central Division, and they gave Carolina a really fine club. They were my preseason and pre-playoff pick to win the Cup. It didn't work out that way, but they really gave the Hurricanes all they could handle in that 6-game set. And I think that is what John Hines wants the team to be like. I thought their identity is a hardworking, blue-collar, more gritty, hard-to-play against team. I think we saw that during the stretch run and through a lot of that series against Carolina. And it's easy to throw guys under the bus, but it's when in a flat cap world, your guys Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene, both highly lauded, talented centers, have simply not done what they need to do, and especially vis-a-vis what they're paid against the cap. It has not been what the Predators signed on for and what they need to remain competitive. Now, I know Ryan Johansson. I spent some time with Ryan. I think he's such a terrific guy, and this is a really important year for Duchene and for Ryan Johansson to prove that they are elite NHL centers, and even with the changes along the blue line, with Ryan Ellis leaving, Kalle Järnkrok going to Seattle, Victor Arvidsson not happy with his role in Nashville, going to LA. I still think there's lots to like about this team. I'm curious to see Eli Tolvanen. I thought showed flashes last year, had some injuries, but there are a number of players on that Nashville team who I think are going to challenge the older players. Again, not unlike Craig Berube, John Hines has to get this team in the playoffs, and he will go with who's going. And if that means reduced ice time and reduced roles for Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene, and we saw this happen at times during the latter part of the season in the playoffs, that's what's going to happen. But the biggest question for me now is what happens with Philip Forsberg. He's their most important player. I think you can argue he might even be more important than Roman Josi, given the depth on the blue line. But let's call Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg, the twin foundations of that team, and they have to keep him. And can you keep him at, let's say, the same price point that you have Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson at? You're talking pretty top heavy in a flat cap world. So a lot of challenges for John Hines to keep that team competitive, and a lot of challenges for GM David Poile in how he handles, this contract year for Philip Forsberg. We do know historically that David Poile almost always will move a player rather than lose him without returning any assets as a free agent. So that's something to keep an eye on as the season moves along. I think this is a team that should be right in the mix for a playoff spot once again.
Now, let me ask you this just before, because I want to get to Rob DeLuca here, because he's been quiet this whole time. Scott, for you, when you saw Ryan Ellis get shipped off to Philadelphia, did that catch you by surprise, or did you expect a move like that, or especially that significant, coming from David Poile?
Well, I just think they had so much. They had so much. It's a good problem to have, but with that defensive lineup and so much discussion about Matthias Ekholm perhaps being moved before the trade deadline last year, and I thought the return for Ryan Ellis was fine, and I think what it does is you have to make some hard choices given the flat cap situation. I know when Ryan Ellis signed his big extension, and when it came time to name a new captain in Nashville, it really came down to Roman Josi and Ryan Ellis. That's how important Ryan Ellis has been to that team. I think he's a good fit in Philly. I think that's going to work out fine. I'm not sure Ryan Ellis has been quite the same since he took the Corey Perry elbow in the head early in the Winter Classic against Dallas. It was a cheap shot. Perry was suspended, but it took Ryan Ellis a long time to get back. If he is the Ryan Ellis of old, it's a great, great ad for Philadelphia, and they will miss him in Nashville. But I think this was just it's an embarrassment of riches on some levels in Nashville, and this was a hard decision. I think Matthias Ekholm was the key to that, though, and I think that was part of the decision that David Poile had to make.
Yes, Scott. So let's keep it going with Nashville here. Let's hypothetically say, as you said, you think they'll be in the mix for the playoff spot. I agree with you. Let's say it goes horribly wrong. Like hypothetically, it's not working, and David Poile's left with decisions to make about, because as you said, he will move a player sooner than lose him for nothing. Mm-hmm. So let's say it might need to be blown up between Matthias Ekholm, between Philip Forsberg, who are on contract years, because I think those are the guys you may have to look at moving, as opposed to guys like Duchesne or Johansson, because they're making $8 million each for a very long time. Those contracts,
you'd also have to retain salary too.
Right, yeah, because those contracts are very difficult to move. You can't ask a team to take on cap like that. But then you look, Philip Forsberg's only $6 million. Ekholm's less than $4 million. Where would you have to see David Poile go to kind of make changes? Because like we've seen in New Jersey, it's been as a Devils fan, I've seen a lot of sell of players I didn't want to see sold, but didn't have a lot of choice because they're not making that much and we needed the draft stock. So what would be the route he would have to try to do?
I will say Tom Fitzgerald, he jumped into the buyer's aisle this summer, though. So there you go. So I think speaking of former Predators, of course, it really is if the season goes south for the Predators, it really becomes a nightmare situation for David Poile, because if it goes south, I assume that will be because Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson, at least in part, are not producing at the level they want to. And you are right. Yes, those contracts would be hard to move. But honestly, I don't think you can ever say never in this NHL. I mean, Oliver Ekman-Larsson goes to Vancouver this past offseason. And if you looked at that contract, now Arizona had to take back some baggage of their own to move that contract. But if you looked at that contract, you say, no way a team is taking Oliver Ekman-Larsson with what was left on his deal and given the current state of his game. So, could you find a taker for Duchene or Ryan Johansson? Listen, there's always going to be a market on some level for elite centers, and there will always be teams. And again, as Joey points out, if there's a retained salary, I mean, there's lots of ways, if you take another expiring, maybe shorter term contract, again, that's sort of how that Vancouver Arizona deal worked out. Listen, David Poile he's the master at this kind of thing, but simplest thing will be, and maybe more, the simplest thing will be players on expiring contracts. And if you don't think you can return Ekholm, and if you don't think you can return Philip Forsberg long term, then yeah, those are the guys that likely will be moved. And those are both elite players. We knew there was a ton of interest in Ekholm last year, leading up to the trade deadline. It would be the same this year, assuming good health. So, but yeah, if it goes sideways, it will be hard times in Nashville. And I am curious to see whether, can they build on that sort of, surging into the playoffs. And then I thought a really solid playoff performance. UC Saros, again, I still talk to people who are like, too small. He's not tall enough. And there is still some skepticism about UC Saros because he's not the prototypical 6'4", guy. So
yeah,
lots of moving parts in Nashville, but I still think they're a playoff team.
So,
right.
go ahead, DeLuca.
Yeah. So let me just move it. Let me move forward here. Let's take it out west a little to Colorado. The heavy favorites in the Central Division yet again, and rightfully so. However, they are now without star goaltender Philippe Grubauer, who has since signed with Seattle. Yeah. Do you see that potentially being an issue for Colorado? Look, there's no doubt their scoring depth is there, but Grubauer was a key piece to Colorado's success. So do you see maybe
and they traded a first round pick for
throw him off a little
Kemper
and
too.
Put someone else in the race for the number 1 seed in that division?
Yeah, I'm not. I think Philip Grubauer is a fine goaltender. His numbers were outstanding. I wouldn't be surprised if Darcy Kuemper's numbers are just as good and maybe better. And now the question for Darcy Kuemper has been, can he, his durability. Okay, so if he stays healthy, and I mean the Avs went through this last year, right? Pavel Francouz, who had been so good 2 years ago, didn't play a game. So what was the goaltending depth there? That was an issue for Joe Sakic and the Avs, and it was an issue the playoffs before when everyone was hurt on that team, right? I mean, it was it got down to really bare bones. So sometimes you can't plan enough. I mean, sometimes you only have the depth that you can have, sort of thing. And the Avs have been tested in that way. I like Darcy Kuemper a lot. I know he's worked so hard to regain his form, and teams really liked him. Edmonton loved Darcy Kuemper, would love to have had him. So I think Darcy Kuemper is going to be more than okay in Colorado as long as he stays healthy, which I guess you can say about every elite NHL player. The question for me is, this is a team. Nathan McKinnon, I just love he's so refreshingly honest, and I don't know what form it was in, postseason interviews or whatever it was, but basically all the time he's been in Denver, as good as that team has been the last 2 or 3 years, they have very little to show for it, and really let a series against Vegas get away from them. Vegas shut them down, and what they shut down was the strength of that team, right? That the big guys were negated in that series. A lot of the offense, when it came from the back end and the depth scoring for the Avs. And I think that has to be troubling. And I think if they play with a chip on their shoulder, they should be the cream of the Central Division. First place should be a lock for them. And I think they will play with that urgency. This, again, we talk about coaches on the hot seat. This is an important season for Jared Bednar, right? I mean, came out of nowhere, really, took that team from rock bottom to, approaching the pinnacle. Well, okay, now, what are you? Are you just a contender on paper, or do you have the goods? I think a healthy Eric Johnson is really important for that team. They miss that guy on the ice, and they miss him in that room. He's such, man, he can play on my team any day. And so I think they missed him a lot. They're going to miss Ryan Graves. It's Graves in New Jersey, right? Yeah. So, this is a team that got pushed around a little bit. We'll have to see. But they're still a fine team. And to me, along with Vegas, are the cream of the Western Conference.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And now I want to move to the next team here in Arizona, just because, for the hell of it, right, Scott? And we you spoke about earlier about Oliver Ekman-Larsson earlier going to Vancouver. And then you also discussed too about how, they would move OEL, and only retain $750,000 or $950 or whatever it was for the remainder of that contract. And we know that obviously they're probably going to be, if I was a betting man, dead last in the division, no questions asked. They had a complete fire sale. They brought in Andrew Ladd, Louis Eriksson, and you want to talk about also a deal that you couldn't believe get done. My jaw, Scott, nearly dropped when Lou Lamoriello made that deal for literally nothing to ship Andrew Ladd a conditional third and a second-round pick for literally nothing in return. No one ever thought out here that that would have happened. And there's also the arena issue as well, that they could be moving to Tempe. They put a brand new $1.7 billion idea together for the city of Tempe. Xavier Gutierrez, when he took over, the first minority owner in the National Hockey League, phenomenal stuff. But on the ice and the performance there, it's been a legitimate disaster. What are your thoughts with Arizona as we head into 2021?
I was looking to see how many draft picks they have in the first 2 rounds next June or next whatever date the draft is in Montreal next offseason.
Yeah,
it seems like 100, but it's 8 in the first and second round. So yeah, no, I don't know what it's going to look like in Arizona this year. It's not going to be pretty. The worst part for Arizona is, for me, the Pacific is by far the weakest division in the NHL. There's a lot of teams that are in transition or turmoil, or there's a lot of uncertainty there. So at least if you stayed in the Pacific, you might have a fighting chance to stick around and play some meaningful games. But in the Central, it's going to be so hard for that team, and they have moved away from, we talked about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Darcy Kumper. There's one of my favorite players that went in that deal to Vancouver, Connor Garland. Anyway, the bottom line is that Bill Armstrong is going scorched earth. Took over as GM. There's been so much negativity around that team, both with the hockey operations and how they've approached things, and then of course the arena thing, which remains unsettled and uncertain. But we've been saying that now for 20 years. It's ridiculous that it still goes on like this. But on the ice, it's going to be a real struggle there. And Andre Tourigny, coming over from a really successful career as a head coach at the national and major junior level, also has some NHL experience as an assistant. I think he's going to be a good fit there because it's going to take some patience. There's going to be a lot of teaching that goes on there. You've got to keep guys like Jacob Chychrun engaged and part of the process, because you have to be looking. I mean, we're not talking 1 or 2 years. I think we're really talking probably, like 3-4 years, if all goes well, before this team starts to really, in theory, capitalize on their assets as draft picks and prospects and those kinds of things. But it looks to me like a mighty uphill run, and I don't blame Bill Armstrong for going that way. I see them as somewhere between 30 and 32, and a lottery team, and maybe get the first overall pick next year at the draft. But it's not going to be pretty there. But this is this may be the opportunity for surprises there. There's not going to be any pressure. If they can keep their focus and those young players get the opportunities, maybe the school of hard knocks. But I am fascinated to see, because this is really, I think, year one of, maybe the final rebuild in Arizona. But it's not going to be pretty, I don't think. But I hope it's going to be fun to watch.
Now, I want to move to Minnesota, because Minnesota had obviously the contract dispute with Kirill Kaprizov just a couple of days ago in that I think it was the training camp opener with Billy Guerin, of course. And Kaprizov, he did say, he's like, well, I think someone asked him, is he actually going to play in the KHL? And he said, quote unquote, no shot. Now he's making $9 million times 5. And in a couple of years also, Minnesota is going to have $14 million on the dead cap because of the buyouts of Ryan Suter and Zach Parise. Is there, and yes, we know about the new TV deal. The flat cap era should be ending this year. All good stuff there. But again, when you've got that massive double-digit number in dead cap, normally we see that in American football. We see that in basketball, wherever that may be. But in hockey, this is brand new territory that Minnesota is going to be the first team going down that road. Scott, what do you think with Minnesota and what Billy Guerin is going to have to do in the next few years to really get them back into playoff contention?
Yeah, it is fascinating. I was lucky. I spent the days leading up to the draft with the Minnesota Wild in their war room, for want of a better term, and listened to their discussions about how to build that roster and the free agency, and also with an eye to what is going to happen over the next 3 or 4 years in terms of the cap hit. And what it comes down to for the Minnesota Wild, and every team can say this, but it's exacerbated by the buyouts of Suter and Parise, as you mentioned, is that you have to draft and develop right. You can't miss. And so, Kaprizov is, I like that deal for both of them. It makes sense to me. He's a dynamic young player. The homegrown talent is going to get a chance there. And I have all kinds of time for Bill Guerin. And frankly, you don't make those kinds of moves without ownership's blessing. I mean, it was Craig Leopold who was determined to bring both Zach Parise and Ryan Suter into the fold, the 14-year deals, all that happened long before Bill Guerin was the GM. But ownership standing behind management, who said that they believed that it was important to change the culture in that room, and that even though there was going to be considerable cap pain made with these kinds of decisions, that ownership was behind it. Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure on Dean Evison and the coaching staff. It puts a lot of pressure on those kids, Eric Sinek, all those kids who will now take another step forward in terms of the depth chart, in terms of the responsibilities, and also being mentors and leaders for that group that will have to come quickly behind them. I still like, I like the way I like the defense is still, it's still a very solid, potentially dynamic blue line. They're going to have to get it done with lots of people up front. Kaprizov's going to have to answer the bell after 55 games, a lot of pressure on a young man, but I think he's the kind of guy who delivers that. I think they're a team that will be in the mix for a playoff spot as well. It's going to be crowded, but I think the Wild are going to be there. We saw them last season. Again, a team that never quit, a lot of young players really stepping forward. So I don't see it's going to be that much different. Makes it different. It's going to be a difficult 2 or 3 year period though. But if you draft and develop properly, maybe it's less painful than people expect.
DeLuca, take it away.
Yeah. So let's look at Minnesota here. And besides Kaprizov, obviously, Scott, who would you say is the big X factor? Like it could really, if this one player has an amazing season, it could really propel Minnesota to that level that they want to be at, maybe even sooner than expected.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a number of them. I'm really curious about Kevin Fiala. There's been so much yin and yang to his game. And again, when you talk about the change in culture there, and you talk about young players who are going to not just have to produce, but have to step into leadership roles and become mentors. I mean, that's the whole, we talk about culture in kind of a throwaway line, you have to change it or it has to exist. I think Kevin Fiala is an important part of that change. And we'll see if he can respond to that kind of pressure, because he is a key. He's shown certainly in stretches that he has all kinds of offensive tools and can be an everyday top six player and your first power play guy. But he's got to do it not just for 40 games or 50 games. This is an 82 game test for Kevin Fiala. So I'm interested to see how he responds.
Now, go ahead, DeLuca.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Joey. I just think that I agree with Scott completely there.
Yeah.
I think especially when it's an arbitration RFA contract year for a guy like Fiala. So you that's definitely someone you would want to look at, because are they going to get the big bucks now? And are they going to get the long-term protection that these players love to get when it comes time to turn 26?
Right, and he also had problems in Nashville, too. We have to keep that in mind, too, where, they made that swap with Mikhail Granlund as well, and then Granlund eventually cashed in, so we'll see what Fiala can do out in Nashville, up in Minnesota, but I mean, hey, listen, his first couple of years, I think it was 2 years ago, it was the COVID year. He did phenomenally. And, now speaking of actually the COVID year, Scott, I want to go into Dallas because you're very familiar with them. We speak about, at one point they were Stanley Cup finalists against Tampa. And in the bubble, this is a team that last year they dealt with so many injuries. They signed Joe Pavelski a few years ago. I can't believe we're already saying this, but he's in his contract year. And they needed that leadership part. And to see now what Dallas could do, my guess is as good as yours. Were they 2 years ago a flash in the pan?
Yeah, this is an interesting campaign for the Dallas Stars. And I think you're absolutely right, Joey, that the Stars never quite got over the early COVID outbreak in the team. Their schedule was murderous. I think last year you can throw out, again, Tyler Seguin coming off the hip surgeries, and you could see it in the final 2 years ago. And I know people were critical. What's wrong with Tyler Seguin? And you knew that he was physically ailing and not who he should be. And I think that'll be interesting to see whether he can find that kind of elite groove that we know he's capable of. I think Jamie Benn, probably given the way he's played, and the expectations have to be muted for Jamie Benn, right? Even though the contract suggests otherwise, he's probably a 50, 55 point guy. That's just the reality for him. But there are lots of young players in that lineup. Rope Hintz, who also went through injuries last year, Denis Gurianov, Kiviranta, Yoel Kiviranta. The forward group there, they may not be the Tyler Seguin, Jamie Benn show anymore, but I think they're a team that will be able to keep pace offensively, and those young players are going to continue to get opportunities. The back end is outstanding and interesting. We talked about Minnesota and the departure of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter ending up in Dallas. I think is fascinating. That back end already featured John Klingberg, one of my favorite guys in the NHL going into his contract year, and Esa Lindell. It's Mira Heiskanen, of course, the star of the group. The question, I think, for Rick Bowness, how do you make sure all those guys get the opportunities and the ice time that you want them to get? Ryan Suter's used to playing a lot of power play time. He's used to playing 24 minutes a night or whatever it is. That's not going to happen there. And I think the interesting part for me is, what do you do with John Klingberg then as he heads into a contract year? Still an elite defenseman. No one moves the puck along the blue line, in my mind, as well as John Klingberg, or he would be in that top group and getting pucks on net. And a guy who's much loved in that room, but he's going to get paid. And can he get paid in Dallas? I don't know. It's and then the goaltending, it just looks grim for Ben Bishop. I don't know, what's going to happen with Ben Bishop. Clearly bringing Braden Holtby into the group suggests to me that the expectations for Ben Bishop are modest at best. And now you still got Anton Hudobin and Jake Ottinger, really interesting sort of decisions there in goal. I keep saying this about every team, it seems like. Are there going to be 8 teams from the Central in the playoffs? But I like Dallas, again, to be in that playoff mix. I think they do bounce back after last season.
Yeah. So Scott, let me. Yeah, you brought up John Klingberg being in a contract year. Looking at it with our friends at Cap Friendly over here, if you are correct, that's good for Dallas. But if they fall short of the playoffs, there's a lot of work to be done in next off season for the Dallas Stars. There's a lot of unrestricted free agents. A lot of people could go in a lot of different directions. You got Joe Pavelski, He's 37 years old. Alexander Radulov, 35 years old. You know, it makes you wonder, is Dallas going to try to buy up at the deadline? Or once again, if things are not working, these are and with only 1 year on the cap hit there,
they're legitimate questions.
Rentals. Yeah. It could be like these guys could be shipped off as rentals if it doesn't work, and if it doesn't work out with Holtby or Hudobin, or very unfortunate about Ben Bishop. I really hope that the best comes for him. Yeah. But nonetheless, a lot of work to be done in Dallas. So it really makes you wonder, is this almost like a last dance for Dallas after their bubble appearance in the Stanley Cup final?
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely fair. And you talk about the age of those players. I know people just sort of assume Patrick Kane will be the captain of Team USA in Beijing. Put that C on Joe Pavelski without any problem at all. And he is, not to go down the rabbit hole, but, if Doug Wilson could do a do-over in San Jose, and if he paid Joe Pavelski, even the term that dollar term that he got in Dallas, as opposed to perhaps spending the money he did on Evander Kane, what would life look like then? But to me, that I raise that as a testament to Pavelski's leadership, and he's the consummate pro. And I think you're absolutely right. If the Stars if they somehow find themselves on the outside as we approach the trade deadline, the line would be long for teams, hoping to add a guy like Joe Pavelski at the trade deadline. No question.
Oh yeah. And to even think also about Erik Karlsson as well, which again, another rabbit hole you don't want to get down, because the Sharks can last the whole 40-minute conversation. Scott, let's go down to, or actually rather, let's go north of the border to Winnipeg. And Nate Schmidt was the big acquisition of the offseason. They claim also to be in the running for the playoffs again. And as you brought up earlier, the more we talk about this could be a 7-team division. Obviously it's not going to be, but the way we talk about it, there's a lot of ups and downs for certain teams. And apparently for Winnipeg here, they needed to shore up that blue line. They re-signed Neil Pionk to go alongside Josh Morrissey. Now you've got Nate Schmidt as well. And obviously Nate Schmidt became expendable when Oliver Ekman-Larsson went to Vancouver. Also, last year, he didn't really have that great of a year, and there was a lot of turmoil there between, I believe, him and Travis Green as well, their head coach in Vancouver. So what do you see with Winnipeg now? And keep in mind also, Pierre-Luc Dubois, following the trade from Columbus to Winnipeg, he was, for the most part, pretty quiet.
Yeah, no, I'm fascinated by the Jets, who, was obviously a surprise, sweeping Edmonton, and then really, falling off the map after the Mark Scheifele hit, and which caused him to miss the balance of their very brief series against Montreal. So a lot of players, I think, with lots to prove and lots to answer for. I love the ad of Nate Schmidt. You go back, for me, how important he's been. He was in Vegas. Just an absolute gem to be around. And I think he will fit nicely with Paul Maurice. I think that's a great ad. And I think that blue line, we talked a lot in the last couple of years, Dustin Byfuglien and all the departures, Ben Sherratt, all the departures from the blue line, and how it took time for Kevin Cheveldayoff to repair, that back end. And I thought by the end of last season, they were well on their way. And I think Nate Schmidt's a huge addition and helps bolster that top four. I'm curious to see what we see of Mark Scheifele. I thought his response to the suspension for what I thought was a cowardly hit was not where it should have been. To me, he's got a lot to prove in terms of his leadership and what kind of player he is. And Pierre-Luc Dubois, boy, we saw in the playoffs 2 years ago against Toronto, we saw the kind of presence that, his skill set and his size foretells. We haven't seen much of it since. And part of it was, for whatever reason, his dissatisfaction in Columbus, lots of issues once he got to Winnipeg, health and COVID. This is a crucial year for him because he if he is who we have seen him to be, at least in flashes in the playoffs a couple of years ago, the Jets are going to be, I think the Jets could possibly push Colorado for top spot in the Central. But the goaltending, I like the direction they're headed, but there are some players who have questions to answer and things to prove this season. So I'm curious, I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah. And now for the underdog of the Central Division. You save the underdog for last, if you will. DeLuca, take it away.
Yeah, let's do it, Scott. Let's talk about the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, it looks like all but certain Captain Jonathan Toews is ready to come back and play hockey once again, which is amazing news. Love to see it. And honestly, it seems like the Blackhawks, their future is looking bright. If you ask me personally, I think it looks good. Kirby Dach and Philip Kurashev. I think this team, Dominic Kubalik, I really think this
How about
team
Seth Jones? How about Seth Jones, too?
Seth Jones is definitely something I want to talk to Scott about.
Yeah.
Mainly the contract extension he was given that'll kick in at the start of next season, because it is a very, very long contract starting next year, a full 8-year extension, $9.5 million per year. And Scott, what was your initial reaction when you saw that?
Yeah, my reaction was, well, good for Seth Jones and his agent. But, we saw where the bar was set. We see, Dougie Hamilton's deal in New Jersey. That's where, the pendulum has swung.
Yeah.
You have to pay those defensemen. You can't win without the blue chip defender. If you don't have a Victor Hedman, if you don't have a Miro Heiskanen or John Klingberg, go down the list. Drew Doughty. If you don't have those players, it's hard to win. So, okay, I know the analytics people have been all over Seth Jones the last couple of years. I'm not dismissive of the analytics. I get the numbers. I get that he didn't have a great year. He'll be the first to admit that. No one did in Columbus. I just think he's going to be such an important figure in that room and on that blue line. He's going to play a ton of minutes. He will do what you want. I think of him in the playoffs and, a quintuple overtime game against Tampa. Yeah. I want Seth Jones on my team and on the ice as much as possible every night. So I think it's a great ad. Is the goaltending. I love Marc-Andre Fleury there. I love that he's gone back, and we know what he did in Vegas. Again, he still has the skill set, despite being, in the twilight years of his career, a Hall of Fame career in my mind. Again, I think the presence in that room, Jonathan Toews back, Patrick Kane still at the top of his game. I don't know where they fit. I think they're in that mix for a playoff spot. And certainly Stan Bowman has constructed this roster clearly with a view to being a playoff team. That whatever transition, whatever rebuild, whatever you want to call it, it's over now. If you blinked, you missed it. So they're a fascinating team to watch, and it certainly ups the ante on Jeremy Colleton behind the bench. Again, I think he's done a nice job taking over for Joel Quenneville. Huge shoes to fill. I think he's growing into that role. But again, we're turning a page now with that Blackhawks team from can you find something here, or can you create something, to you better deliver something now. And we'll see how that goes for Jeremy Colleton this season.
So we're going to let DeLuca conclude our chat with Scott Burnside with his, I guess we can call it,
sure. We'll trademark whatever.
Pretend copyright ask of
sure.
The division alignment, if you will.
Yeah, I asked Jesse Granger about how he thought the Pacific was gonna line up. So Scott, I'll ask you the same of the Central.
Yeah.
Me personally, I think it's a 5-team division, 5-team playoff with how weak the Pacific actually is.
Yeah.
But I am not you, so why don't you tell us how you see the 8 teams in the Central lining up, and how are they gonna? How are those teams kind of going to advance around in the playoffs? Because as we know, we are thankfully back to normal.
Yeah.
In the NHL. So what do you see happening?
All right. I'm doing this without cheat sheet. So if I forget a team, just let me know. Honestly, I think you start with Colorado. I like Winnipeg to slide into second. I think the Blues bounce back into third. See, now that I'm hedging my bet. I think, could be, I've got Nashville, Minnesota, Chicago, in that next group. I'm going to put Arizona at the bottom. Who am I missing? What's my other team?
Just Dallas.
So you've got Dallas.
Okay, so I'm putting Dallas in that 14 group in that battle for fourth and fifth spot. So I sort of hedged my bet there. But honestly, I think it will be achingly tight. I think it's going to be great drama. I do think there will be 5 teams come out of the Central. So much of it will have to do with injuries. But I do think that there's probably a lot more parity in the Central than there has been in the past.
Absolutely amazing stuff. Right. It's really unbelievable. And to think also, especially out here on the East Coast where, say the 3 of us are, you're just a little further south than we are, Scott. We always hear the Atlantic and the Metro is always, the best 2 leagues in the National Hockey League. But I don't know. I mean, in a sleeper conversation, I would say the Central is just right there, especially after our conversation here today. Ladies and gentlemen, former ESPN writer, former Athletic contributor and writer, Scott Burnside. Scott, thank you so much for coming on with us here tonight. We really appreciate spending so much time with us.
Yeah, anytime, guys. Call anytime.
Or there we go. All I've got to say, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
So for those that were not aware, that was pre-recorded this morning, actually.
We'll admit it.
And we cannot thank Scott Burnside enough, formerly of ESPN, formerly with The Athletic, most recently with the Dallas Stars as their main media correspondent. And now he is a freelance podcaster. And so we had Jesse Granger on before. We had Scott Burnside on before. And that is going to conclude our NHL preview segment for this week. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we have a crossover. And what that means is that the crossover means that we've got some familiar faces on. And of course, one familiar face is the host of the Essential Wrestling podcast that airs Tuesday night here on the Eastern Observer, Al Carl. Al, let me tell you something. It looks so weird with you without a hat. And also and you're wearing and the Eastern Observer too. Hold on.
I know I'm family. You gave me. Oh, I'm muted.
No, he's good.
Okay, I know I'm playing. I'm the guest here. I'll play by your rules for now. He said, you're more than welcome to wherever. If you ever come on my show, either one of you guys, feel free to wherever you want. I know Johnson's got a bunch of wrestling shirts for you guys to wear. But we're here to talk some football today. Actually, fun story. I just saw this article about 10 minutes ago. It was reported on Minutes to Belltime, another one of our partners, minutestopelltime.com, on their Facebook page. That Deadline.com has reported that WWE and MJM have merged and they are going to bring back American Gladiators. So get excited. We're going back to the 90s all over again with everything. Now American Gladiators is coming back and I'm excited. So I think I might be putting a job posting on behalf of the Eastern Observer. I might need a correspondent for that.
Well, listen, it might just be. You're more than welcome to do so. But ladies and gentlemen, the Essential Wrestling Podcast, Al Carl, we're going to be discussing a lot about football here tonight. But before we get to Al, though, I do want to throw this one to Rob DeLuca just because he begged me not to bring this up, and we're still going to bring it up.
Oh, no.
And we're still going to bring it up anyway. And Al, last night, obviously, in Thursday Night Football, the epitome of Thursday Night Football was one of the worst matchups that we have seen in a very long time. And Rob said to me, please, why do we have to discuss this? This game is an absolute wash.
We'll wait till next week.
Oh, no, I hate Thursday night. Thursday night football is meant to be bad. There's a reason they play this game on Thursday, because not as many people can watch.
Well, not only that, too, Al. This was Rob DeLuca last night when he was watching.
Oh my God, it's so true.
When he was watching Thursday night football,
it was so boring. It was literally boring until the fourth quarter, and even then, the fourth quarter wasn't that exciting. What more is there to say?
24-9 was the score. The Carolina Panthers are 3-0, and obviously John Smith, who is a diehard Jets fan, is not on here to discuss the Robbie Anderson and the Sam Darnolds of the world, and really, talking about former Jets legends, of course, that really have made it big down in Carolina. Al, what do you see with this Carolina team? Are they a for real 3-0 team, or are they just a fake?
No, we'll go for real 3-0 for now, because I think their defense is top notch now. And to John Smith's credit, okay, he was completely against drafting Zach Wilson. He wanted to trade back. He wanted to get more picks. He thought Sam Darnold didn't get his fair shake as a quarterback there, and rightly so. And he's showing that. Sam Darnold, again, 300 yards. Again, it's the second week in a row, and I believe week 1, he just missed it. He's the model of consistency right now. It was a 23 for 45. I did some numbers dive. Last time I came on the show, I was unprepared. I tried to be better this time. Sam Darnold, he was the model of consistency. He's doing his job. I know a lot of the stuff the week before, it was the quicks to McCaffrey, and he was doing his thing. Now he doesn't have that, and now he's got to be, DJ Moore and Dan Arnold. They're going to be getting into the mix, but this defense is going to be what takes them to where they're going to end up overall. Whether it's 12-4 in a playoff team, or it's just that now it's when McCaffrey's out, they can just shut down Darnold and just let just game plan against that instead of having to worry about McCaffrey. So I do think this defense is for real. I'm having a hard time. I know they beat up on who the last 2 weeks.
First off, obviously week 1 was the Jets.
Yeah, and then week 2 it wasn't a great team either. So, but they're handling them. Yeah, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing if they're going to be a contending team.
It's
so
really
I
crazy. Think and you know what? I don't mean to interrupt you, Al, but it's really crazy to really say contending team Carolina Panthers, and Super Bowl 55 is upcoming, not Super Bowl 50. Cam Newton is no longer the quarterback anymore. It's really weird to see. Now I'm going to throw this one to DeLuca, because there's obviously nothing more to talk about here tonight with the NFL except for Thursday Night Football.
Well, real quick, Rob, I'm just going to interrupt you. The last time that they were 3-0, they went to the Super Bowl.
That is very true.
So
look, this last night, aside from Thursday Night Football being awful, let's actually talk about the Panthers here. Sam Darnold is literally proving everybody wrong, and that the problem was he was on the Jets. Not that he's a bad quarterback. The problem was he was on the Jets. And it's been proved through 3 games that, as Al said, that defense is top notch. The under has hit all 3 times last week.
Yep.
So it's all 3 times this season for the Panthers. Exactly 33 points have actually been scored in all 3 games. It's actually a crazy stat to think about, that the defense has shut them down so much.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I randomly found it on Twitter. But nonetheless, I do think this is a for real 3-0, because they're out here to prove something. Sam Darnold's out here to prove something. They have the defensive weapons to hang on to this. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this team goes moving forward. And besides that, I mean, what more is there really to say about the game other than the Panthers had a great game?
Yeah. There's no doubt. And I mean, there's really not much to talk about with the Texans whatsoever. Brandon Cooks did his thing.
All right, that's who they played.
There really
isn't much to say, because, look, did Davis Mills have a bad game? No. But it's not going to solve anything, especially while Tyrod Taylor's out. So, granted, there was not a lot of hope for this Houston team to begin with. And right now, they're just a dead body floating in the water as this season's going to drag on.
Well, now I have to ask the two of you this because we are just heading into week number 3 or actually last night was the start of week 3, if you will. And there are a bunch of 0-2 teams. And, one of which being the Minnesota Vikings, where and you know what? That was my fault. I should have played the call of the Minnesota Vikings radio play-by-play man who said that the kick was good, yet it was so far to the right. And I should have played that. But that's
That'd have been funny. That'd have been funny. That was amazing.
That would have been absolutely phenomenal. But the best 0-2 team, going to start with you, DeLuca, is who?
It's really hard to look at the standings in the NFL and really say, oh, this team's 0-2, but they shouldn't be 0-2. It's the way things just played out for them. And honestly, there is a case for Minnesota. Everyone thought that Minnesota would be right there giving the Packers a run for their money. So I think that the best thing they can do here is I think it might be Minnesota, but I'm going to pull up the standings here and talk about it. But I do believe that, Joey, you make a case for them because really, you're not going to expect this team to lose a lot more games, especially with the way their schedule's coming up. So I think Minnesota's going to get themselves into the win column eventually. So in reality, you have to just think. You got to think long term. You got to look at strength of schedule for everybody. But honestly, when it comes to 0-2 teams, I mean, you also got to look at a team like the Indianapolis Colts. But no quarterback. I mean, with no true quarterback there at the realm right now, because Carson Wentz is a walking sheet of glass. So it's really hard to say what they can become, and then you have to look at, and that's pretty much it, really, because you look at the Detroit Lions, everyone expected them to be 0-2. You look at the New York Jets, everyone expected 0-2. Really, it's really just the Colts and the Vikings at this point where you can pick from.
So now, just to play a little, and to have a little fun here, because Al Carl is all about fun. We know that, so that means we have to have that. In our show. We have to have that in our show too, because we don't really have enough of it, especially when Ian Schraier is on here. But it's always just straightforward, straight serious stuff. All work here.
Are you saying you want to play Fast Money right now, Joe? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I will play Fast Money right now.
Is it Sam Bradford or is it Carson Wentz that is a bigger sheet of glass? What say you, Al Carl?
Yeah, that's good. RG3's got to be in the conversation too. I remember when they traded him to Baltimore, they wrapped him in bubble wrap and sent him over there to make sure he got there safely. That's a good. I know Sam Bradford's probably the more expensive. He was. They started that rookie cap rule because of him, if I remember correctly. Right? He got like $80 million.
Yes.
Yes. And then he's been. Oof.
Well, you see. I mean, you think to yourself that, now we've got Carson Wentz leading this Colts team that, people thought, well, there could be some fire behind Ryan Tannehill and the Titans. Could they potentially have that, that little spark between Wentz and Frank Reich where, they could potentially get back to 2017 form where, yes, the Eagles went to the Super Bowl. They won it. They won it with Nick Foles when Carson Wentz, he had an MVP-like season until he blew out his ACL at the LA Coliseum. But before we get to that, our producer, who is just over that way, he actually pulled up the video of that botched call from this past Sunday with Minnesota. Let's take a look.
High snap, put down. Joseph, come on! It is gone! No, he missed it. Good. Are you kidding me? He missed it right.
He missed it right.
Oh, my heavens.
Oh.
Well, I mean,
this man actually said, come on, with all the hope in the world that this kick was good. And it's so funny. That's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. And also, let's talk about this for a second. You said the best 0-2 team. How about a shocking 2-0 team like the Arizona Cardinals?
Yeah.
Yeah. What a beautiful thing that is for them. Granted, they won because, kickers. That's just it. Kickers. That's all. Take that for whatever context you want. Kickers. Welcome to the NFL.
But the crazy part is that this is something that we brought up, DeLuca, just a few weeks ago when we were going through our NFL previews, and we said that the NFC West is obviously the best division in all of football. There's no doubt about it. When you look, Arizona, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, and every single team is either 500 or above. Granted, we're only 2 weeks in, heading into week 3, but the bottom line is that Arizona was supposed to really be either 0-2, 1-1, not starting off 2-0, and they also completely, as we've said this word multiple times throughout the show with Burnside as well as Granger, they put the kibosh on the Tennessee Titans, who were supposed to be Super Bowl contenders. Al Carl, who do you see, or what do you see, I guess, that you look forward to the most heading into week 3?
I got 4 games here. Actually, the 2 ones that are they're primetime games. But I'm saying this is what I'm watching. I guess is how I'm putting this.
For sure.
I'm a diehard Patriots fan. Alf's got his hat on. Ted's got his hat on. We're ready to roll. But honestly, just looking at the game, even objectively, I honestly do believe that the Saints and the Patriots is probably one of the more interesting 1:00 games that is out there. So I love watching the Saints play. I love we watched the preseason game. Watched Jameis those 2 drives. Yes, I know Jacksonville. Yes, preseason. We're like, okay, like the Saints are gonna. Jameis will be okay. Jameis can still throw it as far as whatever. As long as somebody's there to catch it, Jameis will be fine.
And it's someone that's not on the opposing team, of course.
Yeah, sometimes it does go to the other team, yes, but. So it's a benchmark game. I consider the Saints, they're a benchmark team. This is going to tell me as a Patriots fan, okay, where is this team really at? Okay, they've had 2 division games, and the Dolphins, that's an evenly matched game. Those games are always going to go either way. The Jets are going to jet. So this is a benchmark game for me. Now, for the Saints, on the other hand, they have a very tough defense, so they're going to be testing Mac Jones, not to mention, where was Alvin Kamara last week?
Yeah.
So, Alvin Kamara, I believe, I had 8 rushes for 5 yards, okay? That's not going to fly. Now, the problem is, and this is where, as a Patriots fan, I'm a little concerned, they are notoriously bad at run defense.
Yes.
So, if you have an upset Alvin Kamara, who got shut down last week and got embarrassed, he's going to try to run all over him. But the thing is, Belichick, you always take away their best thing. They're going to try to shut down. Now that Drew Brees isn't around and Michael Thomas isn't around, they're going to gun for Kamara. So I believe that's a very interesting game on both sides of the ball. And then the 4:30 game, I don't think the entire nation is going to be watching the Bucs and the Rams. There's really nothing that is going on at 4:30 that is going to interrupt. I don't care what team you're a fan of. Set up 2 teams or red zone or whatever. You're going to want to see Tom Brady. It's going to be their first ever road game. They got to fly across country. So that's always got to be something to take into consideration. I know Tom's a California guy. He feels at home out there. But I love the Rams before. I love the Rams with Matt Stafford. Like, I think this is just slinging it because Stafford won me over when he kicked Culpepper off the field with a dislocated shoulder. And he won the game for him on the last play. So Stafford's been up here for me ever since then. And he's always on the top of all the fantasy lists. He's always throwing for 350, 3 touchdowns, and they lose. Stafford can sling it, and that's why the Rams gave up as much as they did, because I think that's the piece that was missing with Goff. Even though Goff did get him there, but they got shut down. And probably the greatest defensive Super Bowl of all time, not the most boring. So those are the 2 games I'm watching. Obviously, then the Sunday night Packers and Niners. Rodgers, he's just getting beaten to the ground about what happened 2 years ago in the NFC Championship game. So he's fired up. And then Monday night, probably Monday night, I'm not an NFC East guy.
Stop it.
But when you have the Cowboys and the Eagles, I have a lot of friends that are fans of both teams. I just sit back, like the Michael Jackson meme with the popcorn, and I just watch them go at it on Facebook as the game's going on. And I guess Rob doesn't like either of those teams. But the thing is,
Rob's a Giants fan.
He's a Giants fan. One giant loss, right? This is going to be a statement game for Dak and the Cowboys. This is going to be Dak is going to have the bright lights, the big stage, and he needs to just stomp out the Eagles in order for anybody to take them seriously now.
It's really crazy that when you said your 4:00 game was Tampa and LA, I don't understand you, Al, because I don't know, the best game of the day is on Jets and Broncos.
Jets Broncos, right?
I mean,
I do have an invested interest in that game, and you will see that upcoming when we start.
Right, and very funny hint. I do too, and I think actually our entire squad has vested interest in that. But in all seriousness, though, you said it perfectly too. As DeLuca was sitting back and yawning and sleeping on Monday night, as he'd rather watch Seinfeld on TBS instead of Monday Night Football. Especially
wrong with that.
You better believe nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And he'd rather do that than watch his two most hated teams because he wants them to tie. DeLuca, what are your thoughts on those four games, or 3 games rather? I think it was 3 or 4 games that Al said. And what are you looking forward to the most heading into week 3?
Yeah, I mean, look, Al has it right. Look, how could you not want to be watching Rams-Bucks? I mean, this is going to be a phenomenal game. NFC Championship preview, highly likely.
Yes.
So it's got all the hype. SoFi Stadium, Palace, gorgeous place. I would love to get to a game out there one day.
Oh yeah.
I have weird, like, I never want to go to California, but I want to go to this stadium. It is a phenomenal stadium. I want to see this Palace. Biasly enough, as a New York Giants fan, I've got tickets for it. It's Eli Manning Day in East Rutherford, retiring the jersey. It's going to be a beautiful halftime ceremony.
How many interceptions will Daniel Jones throw on there? Just for
17.
Just for Eli Manning.
Nonetheless, I think it's going to be a beautiful halftime ceremony.
Do you have any face memes ahead? Any memes?
So many former players are going to be there. It makes you wonder if they're going to allow Eli to throw one last touchdown pass to somebody. I guarantee you, I would love to see.
You mean an interception in the back of the end zone?
Like a Victor Cruz, Plexico Burrest, one of those key guys from all the big games that you just get one last throw into the end zone. It gets the crowd crazy at halftime for no good reason. Because here's the thing. The way the Giants play football, games are, for whatever reason, always close at halftime. It's the second half where it all goes away and blows up in their faces. So it's just a way to keep the crowd fired up. I think it's going to be beautiful. So I'm loving Giants Falcons for personal reasons, but also, I'm also loving Patriots Saints, as Al mentioned. That's going to be a good game. I mean, there's still no Thomas for the Saints, so it does leave a big hole for them. But I think it's going to be a good game overall. Mac Jones has been good to start the year.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to be a big test for him, actually.
Yeah.
The Saints do have a good defense. So I think this is going to be a very, very big test for Mac Jones. So I'm definitely going to be checking the scores and stats of that game while I'm sitting in MetLife. So, and then, 4:30, as Al said, 100% that game. Primetime, look, it is Eagles Cowboys. That's always a grudge match.
Just sit back and watch.
It's gonna be a close game because it just always is. 2 young quarterbacks trying to prove that they belong here. Dak needs to get back on his high horse and be the quarterback he was prior to his injury last year. Jalen Hurts has plenty to prove in that he's a mobile guy. He's been playing well for the Eagles. Let's not get anything wrong here. Jalen Hurts should have been the starter from the moment they drafted him. So nonetheless, I think it'll be a close game. I personally believe Dallas is probably going to win the game, but nonetheless, but I'm not going to take that to the bank just because that's what happens in the NFC East matchups. You truly don't know what you're going to get.
So
that's the way with a lot of divisions too. A lot of divisions.
And it's very funny that you bring up the Saints earlier, both of you actually, because this is actually one of 2 games that I really have one of 3 games that I have my eye on. And why? because I think that this game for both teams is massive, especially when you've got Miami still lingering, obviously. Yes, they did get completely shut out 35-0 against the Bills, but they're still a team to watch for. We got to see it last year. They did well towards the end with Tua Tagovailoa. He's going to be out for a while. The Deshaun Watson trade chatter might pick up because Tagovailoa is out for a few weeks, so we might get to hear that. Jacoby Brissett, former Patriots backup quarterback, is going to be starting down there. But you look at the Saints right away, because now you've got this unexpected team in the Carolina Panthers who are projected to finish either dead last in the bottom of the NFC South or even in third, that now they might have to play this game as a win-now game. You have no choice. This is a must-win game for them, because they could be looking all the way up top to the Carolina Panthers, and they could be falling out of reach before week 10. That would be really crazy stuff to see. And also, this is something else, too, that I brought up last week or 2 weeks ago with Rob DeLuca, or actually last month. I don't even remember when, our final Monday show.
Long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. A long time ago. Indianapolis and Tennessee is another big one, too, because Tennessee is 1-1. If Indianapolis gets in, or rather if they come away with the victory, both teams are 1-2, and the AFC South would officially be, I would say, the second worst division in all of football, which no one thought that in the beginning of the season, where they thought Tennessee, now that they got Julio Jones, they revamped that secondary a little bit. Yeah, maybe that they could really, take things to the next level, especially to get Tannehill some help. They lost what's his face? They lost Jonnu Smith to your New England Patriots. They brought in Ferkser. He's hurt now. They brought him in from Green Bay. He's hurt. Now they have to head down to their second string tight end, and that was the safety blanket, Jonnu Smith was, for Tannehill. Now there might be a little bit of growing pains there, if you will, in terms of the chemistry with the wide receivers. And another game that I look forward to seeing also, oddly enough, is Seattle and Minnesota, 425. And I'm going to go off a little bit here, not on a tangent, but away from you guys, where, Tampa Bay and LA is obviously the marquee game of the week. But Seattle and Minnesota, this is another team that is another game that is must win for both teams, especially because with Arizona playing Jacksonville, this is another team in Arizona that most likely will be, if I was a betting man and I had to put my last dollar on a team, it would be Arizona to go to 3-0. And if Seattle were to win or even lose 1-2, and you have to look all the way up to Arizona, and most likely, or not even most likely, but if LA were to win, they're 3-0 also, and Seattle was supposed to be, second or potentially even first. They were supposed to lead the NFC West. And Minnesota, for instance, they could really be at 0-3 if things do not go in their favor. Really crazy stuff to see that we're talking about must-win games here in the third week of the season. And as Al Carl always says, the season is just flying by.
The season's just flying by.
It is.
Actually, Joe, real quick, if I can go back, I want to get some love, because I haven't
do whatever you like.
I haven't known two teams. You gave me that question in the nose, like, who's the best known team? And I looked at them. I think there's only 6 of them. There's not many. There's 6 or 7 of them, right? There's not that many.
Yeah.
There's a lot of parity going on, a lot of 1-1. You're right. The Indianapolis Colts, they're in the conversation. But when you have 2 quarterbacks right now, you have none, right? Isn't that the old saying? So I didn't want to pick the Colts. And then obviously the Minnesota Vikings, that's the other obvious pick. But then I think they've allowed about 75 to 80 points already in both those games that they played. I mean, they're getting –
so, yes.
The defense is getting shredded. So I'm going to go a little out on the limb here. I'm going to go with Detroit on this one. I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions on this one, and here's why, right? So last Monday night, watching the game, all right, first of all, week 1, all right, San Francisco's got a tough defense, right? Well, Detroit and Jared Goff, who's playing with a huge chip on his shoulder, hung 33 on him, all right? So you have that. Plus, last Monday, they were beating the Packers at halftime before, I guess, the Packers figured out what was wrong in the locker room and then came out and smoked them. But they had the lead. Goff threw that dime to Hawkinson in the corner of that was probably one of the prettiest touchdowns I've seen in a while. And there's been some good ones. But the thing that was sticking out to me during that game and even during that broadcast is Louis Riddick. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about announcers or commentators or whatever. I like Louis Riddick. I respect Louis Riddick for who
I love that broadcast.
And as an administrator, I like how he talks football. He is in love with this Detroit Lions offensive line.
Yes.
So, in my personal opinion, I think the offensive line is probably one of, if not the most important thing in football. Because if you don't have a line, you can't run the ball. And if you don't have a line, you can't protect your quarterback a la one giant loss. You can't protect the quarterback, you're not going to win. Okay? So,
look at Kansas City last year in the Super Bowl.
What's that?
Look at Kansas City in the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah. If you get to the quarterback, you're going to win. So if Louis Riddick he said it, I think the exact quote was, Detroit is good on the offensive line. I think they're just young, and that's what it is. So I think Detroit, and I think they have somebody tough this week too. I forget who they're playing. They're going to be 0-3.
Baltimore.
Yeah, they're going to be 0-3. Okay, so which is fine, but I think they're set up, and then their head coach,
which is fine. It's okay. We know that.
Fine. It's whatever. Detroit's going to do whatever. As long as they don't go 0-17 and break their own record, they're fine. But their coach is Dan Campbell. And fun fact about this coach assistant on Monday, I actually stayed up for Monday Night Football to watch this game. He is the first player to become a head coach who played for Bill Parcells.
Wow.
Whoa.
So
I did not know that.
So he's a Parcells guy. And you saw him on the sideline. He's still jacked. He's still hitting he looks like he can still play, Dan Campbell. I'm like, all right, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna watch Detroit. I don't want to pay. I'll pay attention to Detroit. But yeah, they could do it. And I think the Jets have small promise too. I like Saleh. I think he's the guy that can get behind, but their Jets are they're gonna jet.
Well, they are. That's what they are. The
Jets will jet.
Right, exactly. The Jets will just continue to jet. And DeLuca, look who just popped in the comments. Look at this. He didn't come on the show tonight.
Even though we told him to.
He had a long day at work. So
yeah, I know he did. But
yeah,
if you could chime in on the Facebook comments, why can't you do it live on the air? That's all I'm saying. I'm not gonna blame him. He did have a long day at work. But I mean, if you're gonna make all these intelligent comments, why not allow the beautiful viewers to see you?
Well, not only that. Listen. This is what before we get to the question. Al, we do have a segment on this show of what really grinds our gears, and this is exactly what grinds Rob DeLuca's gears, is that he cannot see Ian Schraier. That's really
it bothers me every week.
Going back to the offensive line issues, quote, issue for the Lions on the offensive line is injuries have ravaged it. Decker and Ragnow can anchor that. Yeah, that is definitely true. And now we've got another one. Issue with the Lions is that they've been ravaged by injury. If healthy, Decker and Ragnow now combined with Sewell, if they can just overcome being the Lions.
That's it. That's the same problem the Jets have.
Right. Right. Exactly. That's the problem. That's the issue is that, and you know what? And actually, I'm going to throw the two of you under the bus here. Who might be the worst, Lions or the Jets? Who could win that game? Or would it be a 3-3 tie if the two teams?
No. Lions by like 20. No way.
Yeah, are you kidding? That's a blowout. Yes. Wait a minute. That's a blowout. Hold on a minute. The Lions would run them over.
Well, all right. Let's keep on moving forward here, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as we brought up earlier, we've got our survivor pool. Now, what that really means is that we don't actually have people eliminated, since we only have about, I think, 12 of us, which is really
there'd only be Essential Wrestling people left. Exactly. We'd all be dead, Joey.
Exactly, and Al did the standings, and obviously for the crossover, we get to have some of his graphics on our show, and it'll be vice versa when we come on his show and whatnot. It's going to be tons of fun this entire season. We're going to have Al on, we're going to have John Smith, John DeConnie, the rest of the crew on at some point for sure. And the standings right now, Al, if you want to pull this up here,
we have two different standings right now. This is the ones for our guys. These are we are picking this week coming up. So,
Real Madrid.
What's that?
With Gary's pick.
Okay. Time out. All right, let's just go back here. Okay, Gary Mahaffey is our NXT United Kingdom correspondent. He lives in Belfast, Northern Ireland. He doesn't understand the concept of football, so I'm like, Gary, we're doing football picks. So he sent me Real Madrid as his pick for this week. So we're trying with Gary. It's a little bit confusing. But God bless him. He's great at what he does for corresponding NXT UK for us over there in Ireland. But yes, we have myself, Ryan Joy, Travis Severance. We got the Broncos. They're got a home game. They got the Jets. We'll take care of that. John DeConnie picked the Broncos last week, so he had to go elsewhere. He went with, Joey, what you were saying before, the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
Down in Jacksonville. I do believe that is a road game. That is cross country.
Yeah.
Possible trap, that west to east jump. You're playing at 10 in the morning if you think about it. So it depends on if Kyler Murray, I guess, is awake at that time of the day. John Smith's going with, like I said, the Baltimore Ravens. They're going to Detroit. Like I said, I tried to pick home teams. John Smith, John DeConnie, they went with road team. And then Tyler, I understand that I tried to make this a 6-on-6 just so it's fun and even. And I know that Tyler and myself, we were the original hosts of the Essential Wrestling Podcast. He's going to bring us down, man. The Chicago, first of all, he put the Giants in week 1. So I'm like, okay, Tyler, okay, whatever. Get your
Tyler
pick out of the way.
Tyler a Giants fan?
Yes, Tyler. Get your
Tyler,
pick out of the way.
don't pick the Bears. We need them to lose, dude.
So,
we have the Bears pick. We need them losing.
The Bears are playing Cleveland. I don't know if that game. I think the game is in Cleveland as well.
It is in Cleveland.
I can't imagine Justin Fields going into the dog pound and winning that game. I don't. I can't imagine that. So Tyler, just like he does with his wrestling picks, he doesn't pick too well in wrestling either. So this is pretty much on par for us dealing with Tyler Adele on a weekly basis.
Oh, good Lord. Well, John DeConnie is he's watching us. John, cannot thank you enough for we're going to have you on at some point here throughout the football season, of course. And so going back to what we were talking about earlier with the Lions and the Jets, the Lions would win that game on the field, but at least the Jets players get to live in beautiful northern New Jersey.
That's the consolation for being a Jet. It's a beautiful home, sweet home, North Jersey.
Exactly right. That's I listen. I'd rather live there than in Detroit. Also, for Ian Schraier, can Ronaldo come back to Madrid and play left tackle in the NFL? I mean, excuse me. Hey, listen. You never know. Listen. If you can get him over to Manchester, then sure, go ahead. I don't know, or from Manchester. I don't know. Go ahead. And of course, Ian, even as a Giants fan, don't sleep on Justin Fields' stud talent. Yes. But as Al said, though, going into the dog pound, it does, and especially now, this is not Cleveland anymore. This is Believeland. Okay, this is a completely different team now. And all joking aside, though, yes, Baker Mayfield did get hurt last week. But we will see how he's able to come back from the minor injury that he sustained. Can he be able to, propel this team over the Bears that won nicely last week against the Bengals, which, by the way, I chose the Bengals because they look good. Joe Burrow looked good. It looked good in week number 1.
Well, the Vikings are the best 0-2 team in football. So, I mean, that's, if they beat the Vikings, then the Bengals are obviously good.
You see, Rob DeLuca, let us get to your pick because now we've got Al's pick, who's the Broncos. My pick is the Broncos as well. And Rob DeLuca's pick is who?
It's tough because, there's not going to be a lot of opportunities where I can pick a certain team because there's really not a whole lot of questions on whether or not they're going to win football games or not.
You have to pick the Atlanta Falcons against your Giants because I would too.
No, no, I wouldn't. You see, I'd go the other way. It's a special day, but I gotta keep the I got to keep the primetime rundown numbers up. So I'm going to also go with the Denver Broncos because we simply got to keep the numbers up. Look at these standings. I mean, look at this. We simply have to get our numbers up. We are getting killed out here.
It's a disaster.
So for the sake of keeping the primetime rundown in the game, I am going to also go with the Denver Broncos.
Okay, so now and just watch now. This week for all of us, the Jets are going to win. And
yeah, I know this is where
this is the part where it happens.
This is also where the Giants win. The 1 week where I could have picked them and didn't. And it'll never work again.
Yeah, you know what? Atlanta, they tried to give Tampa a run for their money last week. Matt Ryan was playing motivated, and then they got blown out there.
But the Falcons have no defense. The Falcons don't have a defense.
They don't. They don't. Exactly. You know, they throw 48. Yeah, 2 pick sixes didn't help either. But they're That should be an interesting game, actually. The Falcons. And the
Ian makes a point here. Maybe I should have just gone opposite of Joey.
Blame Jarzynka. Who is he picking? I am picking the Denver Broncos, but then right after that, DeLuca, you could pull that one up. What does Ian say after?
Gave us his pick.
Did he just give us his pick? I think he did.
So did. He absolutely just did. He said
I got a question. Okay, now I got a question.
There we go, Al.
Are we already trusting the Raiders? I mean, I know they're playing great, but
I'll say this: they're the worst undefeated team alive right now. They're definitely the worst undefeated team in football. The Cardinals, no. The Cardinals are a shock, but the worst undefeated team right now is definitely the Vegas Raiders.
Those are 2 big wins, though. They have.
They're massive. I couldn't believe. I didn't have them winning either of them, and they won them both.
Our last point here, our last 2 points, rather, from Ian. Burrow looked good, nearly blew a big lead to Minnesota. I don't know. A win's a win, ain't it?
And that ain't his fault. That's his no defenses.
Exactly. There's literally nobody on that defense. What can you do?
What you want the guy with you want the guy with the long orange hair back on the defensive line to save the Bengals? Like
survived an OT. Vikes are a good D. Yikes, Al. Yikes. Yeah.
Wow, I trashed their defense earlier.
I believe that was the case. I don't know if Ian maybe heard a little bit
late. It's fine. That's okay.
Yeah. So that is okay. And now
75 points in 2 games. That's not
up. It's the children's show. Damn it! Don't pull that up.
Great first half team, second half team that could lose to fecal matter. Wow.
There are children watching. We can't say that.
My goodness, Ian needs to go to bed. I think that's why he's not here as well. That I think is the biggest thing here. My goodness, we're going down a rabbit hole like how Scott Burnside said after. We do not want to go down. Crazy stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Let us conclude our show by doing our kudos. And Al Carl, this is going to be his first time doing kudos on this show. And we will get to him last year. We're going to save the best for last for his kudos. That can be anything. And if this is your first time watching, for as long as we have made sweeping changes to this program, we have done a kudos segment where it has been myself, DeLuca, and Ian Schraier, as well as any other guest that stays on with us all the way till the end of the program. They come up with any kudos that they like in any single sport, any single entertainment, anything that is literally anything. So, Rob DeLuca, it's all yours.
Yeah, well, a very special announcement came out the other day from I got to throw to Barstool Sports here. Barstool Sports announced the other day that they are in April of 2022. They are launching a massive hockey tournament for professionals, Olympians, college players can all get together for a week. It's a week-long tournament. It's going to be great. Not all the details are out yet. All we know is that's the case. It's in April of 2022. Oh, and the big catch. It is women only.
Nice.
It is a women's hockey tournament. It is going to be awesome. National Women's Hockey League, the NWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey Association, WHPA. That's where most of the Olympians play, so that's going to be beautiful. And then, of course, the college players that are available at the time, they can come play too. As long as you are a woman that plays hockey, you are welcome at this tournament. And Dave Portnoy, CEO Erica Nardini, look, if you need someone to provide coverage on the cheap, look, I know you're going to go for the big, you're going to go for the big guns, the big sponsors, the big media outlets. But if you need someone on the cheaper side to bring you the broadcasting coverage, I'm in. I want a piece of this action because I see the potential that you guys are investing into the sport of women's hockey. So I want to be a part of that when you inevitably do make a Barstool League for these women. And I want to be a part of it. I have been an advocate of women's hockey for over 6 years now. This sport needs to grow, and I want to be there with you guys when it happens. So good job, Barstool. Way to go. Incredibly proud, and I am ready for April of 2022. And that is so far away, but at the same time, you're going to blink and it's going to be here, and it's going to be a great week.
Amazing stuff to see. But not only that, you discussed also about how you've been a part of women's hockey for so long, the Metropolitan Riveters as well.
That's right.
You're a big fan of them as well in the NWHL. Really cool stuff too. And yeah, so let's keep on moving here, and my kudos is going to go to a partner of the Eastern Observer, the New York Professional Scouts Association, former president, now the secretary, Chicago Cubs scout Billy Blitzer. He called it a career on Sunday. 46 years of Major League Baseball service that he's dedicated throughout his entire life to really Major League scouting. And the scouts in baseball never get any coverage. They really get swept under the rug, and it's really unfortunate because a man by the name of Jamie Moyer was discovered by a good friend of mine in Billy Blitzer, and I can't thank him enough for giving me some life lessons as well, but also really showing me the ropes of baseball as well, a little bit here and there. And we've had a ton of great dinners as well that I've attended, and really good stuff there. That he has done for the game of baseball, and really has just been a big advocate to the Chicago Cubs getting their first World Series in 100 plus years. So, like I said, a big congratulations, a big cheers to one of the longest tenured scouts in all of Major League Baseball, in Billy Blitzer. Phenomenal stuff. And now we're going to throw this one to Al Carl. What is his kudos? I have a sneaking suspicion it is something wrestling related.
It is not actually wrestling.
Oh.
It is to a point, because I want to give kudos to my guys, because in the Survivor poll last week, we went a perfect 6-0. We went a perfect 6-0. Even Tyler got his pick correct. So it was shocking.
He did.
So if you can just real quick, I'll put the standings graphic up. Oh my God. Oh, this is embarrassing. Joe, somebody hacked the show, Joe. Somebody hacked the show. I can't get this off. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
And Joe, you know why he gets to do that? Because look what you did. Look what you did. Look what you did to us. We would have matched them perfectly at 6-0.
That was completely unprofessional on my part, that was unprofessional, Joe. I sincerely apologize. I
don't care. No, that was good.
That's the fun we get to have when Ian's not here, Al.
Exactly.
That's why we welcome it.
It was out.
No, that is the utmost truth, though. Think about it, because you went a full 6-0, and of course, I brought the guys down 5-1. It's brutal stuff. And I don't even know. It's horrendous, and I really should be ashamed of myself.
Well, here's the thing. We're having fun with it. The six of us, we're having fun with it amongst ourselves on the Essential Wrestling Podcast. We're competing against each other, but we are a unit, because Joe, I do believe it was an unsigned agreement, an unsigned wager here. I do believe the loser of this keeps Tyler. So we are taking this extremely seriously. And we just
that's pretty good.
Are we allowed to reject that trade?
Oh my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, a phenomenal
power, Joe. You can taste the power.
A phenomenal show here tonight, but let's get some let's finish the show off with normally what we do here, which will finish things off with what is going to be coming up here on the on the Eastern Observer and the Essential Wrestling Podcast. We'll get to that in a few short seconds.
The Essential Eastern Observer.
There we go. Yeah, right, exactly. So the New York Professional Scouts Association and the Eastern Observer continue its partnership as we continue our Scouts Minute segment. Episode number 73 comes your way tomorrow when we highlight the Brooklyn Dodgers, San Francisco Giants, and Seattle Mariners former area scout John Purek, or otherwise known as Whitey, tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time right here on the Eastern Observer. Also, join our good friend from Minutes to Bell Time, Ryan Joy, every Monday through Thursday with the Daily Wrestling News Show. Ryan Joy comes your way as he talks about wrestling every morning, Monday through Thursday, from about 10 a.m. to about 10:40. Monday through Thursday right here on the Eastern Observer. And we will leave this one to Al Carl. Al, to give us a little segment of what you're going to be.
The Essential Wrestling Podcast every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. at all of the Eastern Observer platforms. Anyway, you are watching this show, you will be able to watch ours again, 6 p.m. on Tuesdays. This Tuesday coming up, we have a jam-packed show. There is a WWE pay-per-view called Extreme Rules on Sunday night. Last year, somebody lost an eye at that show, so that's always fun to watch.
Oh my God!
It was somebody lost an eye.
Okay.
All Elite Wrestling, they're doing a two-part. This is actually kind of fun because this is sports related. A two-part show. Part 2 is tonight. It's called Rampage Grand Slam. And it is live from Arthur Ashe Stadium in Queens, where the U.S. Open is. So they did a show there Wednesday. They're doing the second part of the show there tonight. 20,000 people at Arthur Ashe Stadium. It's going to be a great show. And then we have our own draft as well. We have the WWE draft we have to break down and discuss Tuesday. That will be next October 1st, October 4th. They shuffle up the rosters every year, and it's a little more fun now because half of WWE is on USA Network and the other half is on Fox, and it actually is an executive draft because they want the ratings on both shows. So companies and networks, they get upset when so-and-so gets this guy and so-and-so. So it's a little fun, and it shakes things up every once in a while for WWE. So we have a fun show planned on Tuesday. And, of course, on the Daily Wrestling News Show, I'm Ryan's guest on Mondays. I do believe he is off on this Monday, though.
So, Al, did
Yes.
the yes chant from Bryan Danielson come back on Wednesday?
Daniel Bryant.
No,
Daniel
he
Bryan.
came back with his original name, Joey. Get it right.
Yeah, that's
He came back
Yes.
with his original name.
He is back to his real name of Daniel Bryanson. Bryan Danielson.
Did he bring back the yes chant on Wednesday?
He is not doing the crowd is. The crowd's going nuts. Bryan Danielson is leaving Daniel Bryan in WWE. And so he's leaving the yes chant, him doing it. He's leaving that in WWE. He's just being the American Dragon, which was his name before WWE. He's going by his full name now, his real name. You can't use Daniel Bryan anyway because it's trademarked. I'm not sure if the yes chant's trademarked or not. I don't know if you can do that. But,
Well, the Islanders stole it if it is. So
it was it, and then I stole it, and here I go ripping off the Islanders, and Joey Jarzynka can vouch for this. At my wedding, the stereotypical thing when you want the bride, the groom to kiss, you tap the champagne glasses, right? Not at my wedding. We did yes chants. Once we heard yes chants from my family and my friends, I puckered up and gave my wife a big one, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of yes chants at my wedding.
Unbelievable stuff, ladies and gentlemen. That's really amazing. But we can also have a whole nother episode about Family Feud and Al Carl, and have that in the same sentence too. But let's finish up here, ladies and gentlemen. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, The Primetime Rundown, by searching The Primetime Rundown on YouTube, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And, of course, a little plug for our good friend Al Carl, too. Be sure to search the Essential Wrestling Podcast, also on the following platforms: Google Play, the Apple Store, as well as Spotify and iHeartRadio. Al Carl, thank you so much for coming on here. And we're going to conclude our show by saying best wishes to everyone out there, as well as Al Carl, as well as the entire Essential Wrestling Podcast crew. Yep. And from all of us here at the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Group, Rob DeLuca, I'm Joey Jarzynka. We'll see you next time.